My name's Rebecca Tan, this is Making LARP. This week we're going to be doing Leatherworking 101 and I'll be showing you how to make a spell card holder. So to start with, I'm going to talk you through some of the basic equipment you need for leatherwork. Now, depending on how you're going to do your leatherwork will dictate which bits of items you're using for each project. But a really basic, good piece of kit is handy dandy craft knife and obviously the cutting mat to go with it. Now, if you are sewing your leather, what you'll want is an awl, which is a handy piece of equipment used for puncturing holes in leather before you sew into those holes. Now, as you can see, my awl blade is slightly bent. An awl is generally sold as two separate parts. One is your handle and one is your blade, which is removed and inserted with pliers. Haven't got round of changing out my awl blade yet, but when I went to the shop to get a new one, as you can see the packet there, they also sold me a cork block for £1 and they recommended that that was the best piece of equipment to use if you are making holes with the awl blade, as that is going to damage the blade less and is less likely to cause the bends that you saw there. If you're going to be doing a lot of sewing, for example, you're making an outfit and you're going to be hand sewing it, a good piece of tool next is this. It looks a little bit like a fork, but I don't know if you can see the ends there. They are angled blades, and what you do is you place your fabric over something like this. This is just a cheap plastic cutting board. You put the leather on top, you place the fork on top of the leather where you would like it to make the holes, and you hit it with a hammer. Generally you'll see recommended a rubber mallet, but we don't own one of those, so we just use the hammer that we've got. And that will drive the cutter through the leather, and that will leave you with a straight line of, in this case, 4 equally spaced apart holes. So again, if you're going to be sewing a large area, you might prefer to use something like that if you've got it. They do come in a variety of sizes. The number of holes, the spacing, that sort of thing is different, and generally they are referred to by number stroke number. So example, this would be something 4 or 4 something. Ones to indicate the size of the holes, ones to indicate the number of holes. If you are going to be sewing your project, you can use normal thread. Personally, I'd recommend looking for something that's listed as strong, either specifically for leather or just an all-in-one. So I have this all-in-one thread designed for another leather project. You can also pick up very small leather thonging as kind of designed for that use. This particular one that I had was 3-ply, so 3 strands, and I've split that to use it as projects to make it thin enough. It's almost like a sewing weight, but it's actual leather cord. The other tool, I showed you it in my haul video. If you're going to be just cutting leather, is a strap cutter. As you can see, as you look a bit closer, these are ruled so that you can actually make sure that the width of what you're going to be cutting is the same all the way down. It's generally used for things like making belts, anything like that uses a long straight line. I've just bought mine, it was about £18. So if you don't want to start with that straight away, we've been doing leatherwork for well over a year and a half and I've only just bought one. Metal ruler and your craft knife will do most of the same job, but obviously you have to be a little bit more careful with making sure your edges stay straight and your ruler doesn't move. On to that, we're going to look at some of the tools. As you can see, you've got buckles there. Obviously, you would then be looking at your strap cutter to make sure that you are making a belt or loop of whatever kind that is small enough to fit in there. These are some decorative plate. You'll see one featured on my pre-made spell card holder. These are sold with rivets that attach them. In fact, you can see some in the packet here. And the idea of this is you make the holes into leather and then you rivet the plate on. However, we found this particular piece we've actually had better luck adding some super glue into the mix. We've obviously then got eyelets. If you're wanting to make, say, holes in something that's going to be laced up, you could put eyelets on to make it stronger. We have all sorts of colours and shapes and sizes of rivets, which I'll go over in more detail during the project. And these are Chicago screws, which again you'll have a closer look at when we do the spell card project in a moment. Rivets come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, as do eyelets, and obviously it will depend on the project, so which ones you want to pick out. What we've also got here are popping buttons. Now, as I've showed you the rivets, obviously the next stage is actually putting the holes in your project. Now, two main methods of doing this. If you're going to be looking for a circular hole, either you want a punching lever tool that you use with a hammer. As you can see, this will make a hole. They generally come as a set with each one labelled at the top as to what size of hole it makes. And again, you'd put it on. This time the recommendation I've got is to use an old piece of wood, as obviously the tool is going to sink into the wood as you're pushing it in, and you want it to be able to do that so it's actually going to cut through the leather. If you don't fancy the idea of hitting your holes through, a decent craft puncher will work fine. Obviously you may find it more difficult to get the sizes that you want if you want very large sizes. This one only goes up to 4.5mm, and obviously the tool I just showed you was 10. So if you have a really large hole you need to make into something, you either need a specialist punch tool or the specialist hammer tool. Once you've made the holes in your leather, you're going to then be using a variety of different tools, again with the hammer, on the plastic board. This is the setter to be used with the popper. This is a rivet setter. For this kind of setting, this is your anvil, the bottom piece. It has a small groove in which you would put the front facing part of the rivet in, and then the pointy bit at the end of the stick goes in the back of the rivet, and you would hammer it from that side. We also have, and what I'll be using in this video, are anvil sets where it's just a smooth one side with a slight curve and completely flat the other. So it's just a small anvil with a flat side and a curved side. In this case, the bottom part of the rivet is put on the anvil, and the kind of rounded top part is put with a hammer there, that you can see is rounded on the bottom. So you have bottom part of rivet, lever, top part of rivet, and then hammer it that way. Now, the first of the two projects I'm going to show you today is a spell card holder. This is the one I currently use for my character. As you can see, it's got a nice decorative plate on the top, and it's really simple to make. This one just uses 2 rivets and some leather thonging so it can be worn as a necklace. I'm going to be making today's one in this brown leather, which is helpfully almost entirely a straight line. The first thing you're going to want to do is take your metal ruler and just check that your pieces are roughly the same all the way down. Now, if you're using a larger piece of leather and then cutting it down, you will want to make sure that your pieces are properly straight. Now, in this case, I'm fairly happy that the leather itself is not hugely different, and what I will do is take the smallest piece, if there is one that is significantly smaller and use that as a measuring aid. As you can see, my current spell card holder, my spell cards fit, but my character card is slightly too big. So what I'd like to do is make a longer card holder that is going to fit my character card a little bit more nicely. As you can see, I've now taken it out and I'm going to use that as a bit of a template. Now what you're looking to do with a spell card holder is have two larger pieces and a couple of little strips that are the same width. So I know that this is going to be easily covering my card. So I want a second piece of the same size. Now because this is ended up with a little bit of a ragged edge, I'm probably going to use this piece as the top piece. So now is a good time to check that the edges are not too much different that you're going to see through on your top piece. But that looks mostly fine. As I mentioned, you're going to want a few extra little strips to help make your piece thicker and allow more room for cards. So I've got 3 little strips there, so that should give me a nice big piece to be working with. Now what I'm going to want to do is mark all of my pieces in the same places so that I can make the holes appropriately. So the first thing I need to do that is going to be to change out my oil blade. So I'll do that and then we'll move on to the next section. So I've changed my oil blade. You can tell there's quite a bit of difference in the amount that they curve. Now what I'm going to do is line up my spell card holder pieces as they are going to be in the finished project. Then I'm going to want to use my awl, and it's all block, which is just corkboard, so you could easily, if you have access to that, use it without having to buy it separately. And try and stick my awl through all the layers at once. Happy with how that is? See, pushed it straight through. And then I'm going to want one in the other corner. Now the next set of holes are going to be slightly more towards the middle, and they are what allow you to thong it on a necklace. Now obviously you could just do one central hole and put a little ring or other loop that would allow you to then attach it to a necklace separately, closer to a pendant style. Now that all the pieces have been holed, this is a good time to stop and do any embellishment you would like on the front piece. So to decorate my front cover, I used an image of our group's logo. Our group, the Company of the Brave and Foolish, are based on a ancestor of drinking called Morbia. And I put the piece of paper on top and used the end of a relatively blunt knitting needle to push that design in, and then use some gold lacquer to pick that design out, and that was the cat jumping in a box. So I'm going to allow that to dry, and then we're going to put all the pieces together. So to start putting everything together, you need the following tools. You will want your trusty hole punch to punch the hole for the Chicago screw to go in. This is your Chicago screw here, attached to the character card. The Chicago screw comes in two parts. The first is just like an oversized screw. It has a little notch, so you could use a screwdriver if you really wanted to. And then you've got the piece on the end which has the screw coil. And then the back piece is flat and has a chamber for the screw to screw into. So the first thing you're going to want to do is put a hole in your back piece, and you're going to need to work out where you want that to go, and that make sure your hole is big enough for this piece to fit through. It's going to need to go below these holes, and I can take my character card and sort of compare roughly where I want it to be. So I don't want any of the plastic poking out, and I want it roughly central. There you go. So once your Chicago is going to fit in, you just screw the second part back in. Obviously from that point on you will just unscrew and screw as you need to attach things like character cards and spell cards, and in our system as well, herbs are given in similar card. And each herb will dictate on it what it can do, and it's again torn to indicate that it's used, so you may want to put those on here as well. So now we've got all our layers. I'm going to take that back out just to stop it getting damaged. You're going to want to put your pieces all together. Now in this case we're using the outside holes for the rivets. You're going to want to collect all your pieces together. So if you push the rivet through one end, you're going to want to check your rivet's going to be thick enough to go through all the layers. It doesn't matter if it squishes things a little bit. If it's just too thin, it's just not going to work. So it does just about fit through all the layers. As I mentioned before, I use a rounded anvil and a rounded hammer. So if you can push the bits together, you can sometimes hear them click. And then you take the flat part of the anvil and push the bottom of the rivet on it. You want to make sure everything's lined up first, as you don't want anything being forced into place and being unable to move is in the wrong place without having to take the rivet back out. So you're just putting the flat side on the bottom of the anvil, the rounded side that goes over the top of the rivet on top. A couple of good hits with the hammer and it pushes this securely into place. We're going to do the same with the other side. Put it on the anvil, get your hammer, and there you go. Now these holes here are what you're going to put your cord or other attachment piece to be able to wear it around your neck. In this case I'm actually going to switch to using the chain that my timepiece goes on. So I was actually hoping to use the chain that I keep my timepiece on so that everything's all together, as at the moment I wear both of them around my neck anyway. So the big question is whether that is going to fit through those holes, which at the moment it's probably not. So I'm going to take this opportunity to make the hole slightly bigger using my hole punch. So I was able to get it through on my biggest size, so I'm going to do that again on the other side. Again, you want to try and get your pieces lined up, otherwise you run the risk of some of the centre ones getting caught on the edge, and then you're going to end up with not going through all the layers. So as you can see with mine, I made the hole slightly bigger so I could fit the end of this chain onto it. And now my spell cards and my timekeeping method will be in one place.